Do you have a bike with a Fardriver controller and are trying to figure out how to set it up? Well, this entire video will go over all the parameters and give you some guidelines on how to get going. This is the Fardriver ND72360. There are a couple of variants on this. Some of them have a thicker heatsink, and some of them are green. The green ones don't have a Bluetooth built into them. You will need to use a dongle. So if you're trying to connect and you can't, you need the dongle. So try to look for the ones with the black plastic casing. There are other ones that are rated to higher current levels and things like that, but they will all use the same kind of guidelines that we're going to talk about today. All of these Fardrivers come with a giant plug that has a ton of different wires coming from it that then send out to a bunch of other plugs. Spark makes a refined version of this that reduces the number of plugs and adds a bunch of really nice waterproof connectors to them for easy wiring. But chances are you don't have one of those, but we're going to figure out how to go forward. The main plug is going to have your hall sensors and your temperature wire, and then you're going to have a bunch of other things like your throttle and your ignition and all sorts of different things. You can look at the manuals online and they will show you what all those different plugs are. But for the purpose of today's video, we're going to assume that you have the complementing plugs, so your throttle, your ignition, and everything else, and you are in the process of trying to set up the programming for the bike. If this is a DIY bike, you need to first make sure that your orange wire, which is the ignition wire, is connected to the positive end of your battery. So that would also be the red terminal on the Fardriver. You can add an ignition switch in there, just make sure it's going to be rated to high enough current levels. But the Fardriver will not turn on unless that orange wire is receiving power. So if it's receiving power and you've connected for the first time, the Fardriver is going to start making a beeping sound, and that's actually a good sign. It's usually just going to say that, hey, it's ready to do an auto learn, or possibly the motor temperature sensor is wrong, and a few other things like that. But it's going to make a beeping sound when you turn it on for the first time, and that's totally okay. But now it's time to download the Fardriver app. So go to the Apple App Store or the Android App Store and download the Fardriver app. There is not a compatible app for the Google Play Store, so keep that in mind. If you're trying to work with Fardrivers, you need Android or you need Apple. So I have my iPad with me. This will work on your phone too. And I'm just going to look up Fardriver, and I'm going to download the app. And usually when you open up this app for the first time, it's going to allow you to log in. So if it doesn't, if I go to the COM page, I can go to login, and then I can do verify code quick register. You're going to put your email in, don't do the phone number, and then hit the get verify code. And it's going to say, please open your email and enter the verify code based on your information. So then you're going to receive an email. You can just see that I got that at the top. Sometimes that code can take like 2 minutes to come through. So just keep on checking, and also check your spam. You're then going to input the verify code, and you're going to hit registering. I know it's the wrong tense. It should be register, but input the verify code, hit that little slot, and then hit registering, and it should allow you to register your email. So one thing that's a little bit frustrating with the Fardriver is that it only allows you to have 3 different bikes connected at any given time. So some people are going to have 4 or 5 bikes, and you will have to remove and add them as you update your bikes. But hopefully you're not updating them every time you ride, so it's not that much of a hassle. But let's add a bike now that we have logged in. If you go to the COM page, you're going to see your controller listed if the Bluetooth module is working properly. If you don't see anything, you can hit the scan button, make sure your Bluetooth is on, and it should pop up. So I have my controller selected now, but you're saying nothing is changing. So what you have to do is hit the connected weight bound button. And now you can see it's asking me to log in again, which you're saying to yourself, I just logged in, but that's okay. Close the app down. Reopen it back up. Okay, so to continue on, I've actually pulled over one of our older prototype bikes from about 1.5 years ago. And when I scan, you can see that the controller is popping up. So now I'm going to hit the controller that I want to connect to. I'm going to hit connect, and well, that didn't do everything I needed to do, right? It's still showing connected weight bound. So I need to hit connected weight bound, and then it's going to ask me bound, and I'm going to hit yes, I went to bound, and then it's going to say, okay, you bound. It's a weird terminology. I don't know why they started calling it that, but that's what it is. But now let's just take a quick look before we continue on. Towards the middle of the page, you're going to see 1, 2, 3. Those are 3 different controllers that I have connected to my account. If you already have 3 controllers in your account, you're going to need to click one of those, just like that, and you're going to have to hit unbound in the bottom, unbound, because Fardriver only allows you to have 3 different controllers in your account at any given time. So if you've got 10 different bikes, you're going to have to juggle these different controllers in your account. It's just a weird quirk that they have. Okay, so by now you've probably been listening to your bike beeping at you and it's wondering what's going on. Well, let's do an auto learn. It's the most important thing you're going to do on your bike to get it going. You can't rely on it for everything, but it's going to give you a very good starting spot. So let's do the auto learn. And what you're going to do is go to the bottom page called graph, hit graph, and then you're going to see auto learn underneath system OK. Chances are it won't say system OK for you right now, but it's going to. And hit auto learn. And then it's going to say enter self-learning status, and you're going to hit enter. Now let's go over to the bike. All right, so I'm at my bike and I have my hand on the throttle. The motor is fully suspended. You need to have the wheel completely off the ground. So you can put it on some jack stands, or if you have spools like the Javelin does, you can pop your bike up, but this wheel needs to be able to freely spin, okay? So now I'm gonna hit enter self-learning status. And the controller is beeping. And what you're going to do is hold the throttle down. And when you hold it down, the motor is going to speed up. It's going to stop. It's going to reverse directions and come completely to a stop again. You cannot let go of the throttle at any time. The bike needs to be a complete stop before you let go. All right? So let's do it. It's not going to be very fast either. It may seem kind of fast right now. You can hear it reversing, right? But this is not a speed test. This is just detecting all sorts of different information about your motor. Keep on holding. Do not let go of that throttle. You may see your screen say throttle error at the bottom. Do not worry about that. That's just part of the programming. I know it's weird. Keep on holding your throttle. And now I'm at a complete stop. I can let go of my throttle, and then I can hit exit learn. And now you can see my system is okay. And so if I hit the throttle, we're getting power. But there's a chance, a very good chance, that your motor is going in the reverse direction. And so if that is happening, keep note of it. And what we're going to do is go to the bottom left corner to the parameters. It says Paris. And you're going to see motor direction 1. You're going to flip that lever, and now it's going to go the opposite direction. So don't freak out if your motor's going the opposite way. So congratulations, you did an auto learn. We've had plenty of bikes that have been on the road for 1,000 miles, and then out of the blue, they start making the beeping sound. And we just have to tell customers, hey, just run an auto learn on it, and the controller will pick up any errors and clear them out. It's just kind of one of the weird quirks of Fardriver. There's a lot of customization that goes on in these controllers, and sometimes weird things happen. So, you know, it's kind of like taking the cartridge out and blowing the dust out of it. Sometimes you just got to do an auto learn, and sometimes that just gets the Fardriver right back to where it needs to be. But let's say you just did the auto learn and you're getting another beeping sound, and it's showing that the motor temperature is 1,000 degrees. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to go to your parameters, and you're going to open the Pro up. And in the top right corner, you're going to see temperature sensor. And all you're going to have to do, it's going to be kind of a pain, just go one by one on these, And what you're going to want to do is select one so that the motor temperature and the controller temperature are the same. So most of the time it's going to be around 23 degrees Celsius if you're just at ambient temperature or you're inside a garage or something. But that is a telltale sign. Select a temperature sensor that matches the motor temperature and the controller temperature. If they are very different from one another, you've selected the wrong sensor. And if all else fails, let's just say you have a bad temperature sensor, whatever, move on. Select the temperature sensor that is none. And actually, sometimes the motors just don't have a temperature sensor, so you just select none and you hit save and you're good to go. All right, let's get into some of the fun stuff, which is setting up your parameters. So first off, if you have a bike from Spark Cycleworks, it's a Javelin or a Brute, these are going to be some of the standard settings you're going to see. Let's just go through them very quickly. The main ones that you need to make are the rated speed is 850 RPMs, so that's going to be right at about 60 miles an hour. The rated power is 4,000 watts. The max phase current is 270 amps. Line current is 90 amps. Throttle response is on sport. And throttle acceleration step is 220. And then we usually set the throttle low at about 1.1. You can set that to 1 actually sometimes. And throttle high is about 3.9. So these are the standards that we usually set. Oh, one more. The max line current is at 90. So these are usually what we send the bike out at. It's what we have tested at and find the most reliable tuning for this bike. But let's say you don't have a Spark bike. Well, let's go through all of these different settings and explain what they are. Okay, I'm going to work my way from the top down. Angle detect is 0 to 120 degrees Hall. That is going to be preset by running that auto learn sequence. So make sure you follow that auto learn. Don't change that one. The temperature sensor is something that you can look at. Your goal is to make the temperature of the motor and the temperature of the controller identical when they are at a rest in like your garage or something like that. So if you don't have a temperature sensor, set it to none. But if your bike is saying temperature overheat and all these other things, open up the temperature sensors and go one by one and click on one and then go over to the graph page and check to see if your motor temperature and your controller temperature are the same. You know that you've set them correctly. Okay, moving down to the phase offset. Again, the phase offset is usually set by the auto learn and it tends to be pretty good. But if you're feeling a bit of a crunchy sound on your acceleration, so you hit that throttle and it kind of gives a little bit of a crunchy sound, it just doesn't sound perfect, increase your phase offset by about 5 and see if that does anything. If it doesn't do anything, take the number that it was originally at and subtract by 5 and see if that does anything. If you feel an improvement in either direction, you can keep on adding small amounts of phase offset until you feel it is perfectly set up. It's not always going to be perfect, and you can always run an auto learn again to see if you can kind of hone it in. But generally, we increase or decrease by about 5, and then we increase or decrease by about 2 and kind of go from there till we've kind of honed it in. The pole pairs are set by the motor manufacturer. So if you bought a QS motor or something else like that, go to the manufacturer's page or the seller's page or something like that and select the correct pole pairs. On a lot of QS motors, it's going to be 16, but sometimes it's 8, and you kind of have to figure it out from there. That's kind of one of those things that you will need to look up. But again, that auto learn is pretty good at detecting pole pairs, but every once in a while it does weird things. Motor direction is something we already spoke about. 1 is one direction, changing over to 0 will change it to the other direction. Your rated speed is in RPMs. It's not miles per hour or kilometers per hour. And RPMs are, the only way this program knows how fast something is going. And so really what you're doing is you're taking the circumference of your wheel and you can do a whole bunch of math out to figure out how many RPMs equals how many miles per hour. But I would recommend not doing that and instead going to your manufacturer's page. So go to QS Motors page and it will tell you what the rated speed is. So for the motors that we use, QS recommends no more than 850 RPMs for the longevity of that bike. You're going to see some people putting up to 900. It will work. However, the temperatures are going to accelerate very quickly. You really have to be an experienced rider. You don't want to overheat these motors. It can melt wires, and it's just a bad thing. So better to keep the rated speed within the guidelines of the manufacturer. Rated voltage is your battery voltage, so it's a 72 volt for us. Your rated power is your nominal power. So for our motors, it's 4,000 watts. Rated speed and max speed, it's weird because they're the same thing. Just keep those identical. Back speed is the reverse speed. So if you hook up a reverse button, that's going to be how quickly that thing can go in reverse. If you want to make your bike be able to reverse at 70 miles an hour, you can do that. It just is a little terrifying. So keep that at no more than 100 RPMs for reverse. And now we're getting into the really important ones. So your max line current is something that is set by the battery manufacturers. But usually a good rule of thumb is to take the BMS of your battery and reduce it by at least about 10%. Sometimes 15 to 20% is even a good idea. So our bikes, they have a 100 amp BMS on it. And so we put that down to about 90 amps. And that's a nice, safe place to be. Your max line current is really going to affect your top speed, right? So usually what we say is line current is mostly connected to top speed, and the phase current is mostly connected to the torque that you're going to experience. So you can increase your line current all day, and you're going to feel a bit of a torque increase, but it's until you adjust your phase current that you're going to feel that difference. So keep the line current well within the BMS ratings of your bike. You do not want to make your line current equal to the BMS rating of your bike. You're just going to be running it at peak all the time, and that's not good for the longevity. Phase current, our general rule of thumb is to take your line current and multiply it by about 2.5. So, for us, it's 90 times 2.5. And then you can kind of increase it from there. And this is going to kind of change depending on your rider weight and the weight of the bike and a bunch of other things. For the Javelin, we have found it to be most consistent at about 270 amps reliably. If you are a heavier rider or you're carrying a bunch of cargo and you're getting motor cutoffs, I would highly recommend go to your max phase current and bring that down from 270 to maybe 250, and that will prevent that from happening. But yeah, the general rule of thumb is to take your line current, multiply it by 2.5, and that will be your max phase current. We can talk about max phase current in another video. It's a very technical thing, but for now, let's just use that rule of thumb. Your throttle response, we put into sport because that's the most snappy. If you take it down to the other settings, it's going to be not as twitchy off the line. Throttle acceleration step 220, that is the max. So if you put that down to 100, it's going to be a very slow acceleration. 220 is the most snappy. Your boost line current, we keep that at the max line current rating, but if you connect a boost button to your bike, you can activate the function. We just don't have it connected up right now because it's not very reliable. We did a bunch of testing early on with the boost button, and it was just kind of a weird feature. It wasn't repeatable. So hopefully that's something that Fardriver works out in the future. But for right now, we don't really use it. Instead, we just kind of have the other settings there, and it's been running great. So moving on down to the weak characters, this is all related to flux weakening. And we're getting to some technical stuff right now. But generally, I keep it on 0 for fast, the throttle deceleration step at 128, the throttle low at about 1.1. You could actually get that down to about 1 if you want. But if you notice that your bike is just moving without you even hitting the throttle, that means your low throttle point is too low and you need to bump it up. And then your throttle high at 3.9. And so basically you have a low throttle voltage and a high voltage on your throttle, and the program takes those 2 points and scales your throttle curve between there. Keep on moving down. We see ratios in speed. So I have it set up right now in a way that's actually not correct. So keep in mind, we had the max RPM rated to 850 RPMs. Well, I'm looking down here and I got 1% on some of these higher end RPMs and things like that. And this isn't going to really do anything. So let's talk about what ratios and speed is. So ratios and speed, basically the percentage is the max amount of current that you are going to be able to put out from your battery at different RPMs. So some people want the max power to be sent off at that low RPM to get it off the line. Some people want to take that power down and ramp it as they go up. There's a bunch of different things that you can do. Me personally, I will go through and reduce that percentage as I get into the higher RPMs, because you really don't feel a huge difference at these higher RPMs, and you're just kind of burning power when you don't need to be. And usually what I will do is at 1,000 RPM, which is above what it's rated for, I'll keep it, maybe 10% on there. And those are going to be those circumstances where you got your giant hills and you're bombing it. Okay, so I've updated all my ratios and speed, and you can see how the percentages decay down as I get upwards towards my max RPM. I don't have any power going on those higher RPMs because it's not there. Okay, keep on moving down. We got ratios in gear. So these are going to be your speed 1 and speed 2 settings. So on the Javelin, there are only 2 settings. And so what we would like to do is I'll go to the middle speed and I will put that at about 440, because I know 440 on the Javelin is about 35 miles an hour. I can then adjust the phase current and the line current. So I'm going to bring those down to about 75. And so that is 75% of whatever the max was. So if I had it set at 100 amps, for example, it would only allow 75 amps. And then if I had a low speed on there, which I don't right now, but let's just do it for fun, I would then take all those percentages down and match everything up. Okay, I'm going to continue down to get to the energy regenerate. We don't use regen actually on the Javelin or on the Brute. We use some heavy-duty motorcycle brakes, and the regen is really not necessary for us, and we've experienced some issues with regen, and so we don't really use it, but you may want to. If you are going to use it, you have your max back currents. So you can set these to whatever is going to be best for your situation. I wouldn't go above probably half what the amps are rated to on your battery. Personally, what I would do is I would start them off very low. I would probably go maybe no more than 20% of what your BMS is rated to. Definitely make sure your battery can accept regen, and then kind of work your way down. Similar to the ratios and speed, you have all these different ratios for the energy regen. And what this is going to do is going to say how much regen it will activate at different RPMs. And this is really helpful because if you are at a low RPM, so let's say you're at 125 RPMs, you don't want it to put that full 50 or 60 amps of regen on you. You're just kind of walking your bike and then you hit the brake and it really stops hard. And that can also be true for the higher speeds. So you could be going 70 miles an hour and just tap your brake, and then it is stopping like an e-brake. So you can really adjust how effective the regen is depending on your RPM. And that's something that you can just play around with. This is something that's really fun, and you can tune it. But be really careful with regen. If you have a hub motor and you're putting regen on there, you absolutely need to make sure that you have torque arms. You need to make sure that you have a backup nut on the motor itself, because the forward and backwards motion on that dropout, your motor loosens up. This is also one of the reasons why we do not use it on our bikes. You need to really double check things to make sure they're staying tight. If you want to look up something to help you, look up a Nord lock washer. It's a great way to add some additional security just to make sure that motor does not loosen up if you're running heavy regen. Also, you can run such high regen that it can break an axle. So really, really be careful with regen, guys. If you're using it as your main braking system, just be super careful. I would upgrade your brakes before you go crazy with regen. moving down to the functions page. So these are all the different pins and things. And what's really cool about Fardriver is if you open up the manual and see all the wiring, you can repin things. So if you've got a bad wire or something on your controller, you can go through there and say, I'm going to use this wire instead of the one that I was supposed to use, and repin it. It's really, really helpful. Let's move forward down here to the brake. So the brake functions are going to be important for regen or not for regen. But the main one is, you want it to be when the stop is valid. So when you squeeze your brake, that is what is going to send a signal to the controller to shut the motor off and tell it that you're braking. So usually use the stop valid. There's a couple other ones here. So you can make it like an inverse stop. So that might be helpful for like a Magura brake where it's sending power continuously, and then when you squeeze it, it interrupts it. So 9 times out of 10, it's stop valid, but you may need to check these other ones depending on what you're doing. And then in here on that PC13, you can put it on normal response or race response. I usually put it onto race response. And then in the follow is going to be there for that regen function. So right now on this bike, it has it set up. And so I can do EABS when brake is valid. So if you're doing regen, you got to make sure you have your stop set up correctly. You have to make sure you're either on race response or normal response, probably race response. And then your follow function, you want to set up when the brake is valid. You can also set it up in an interesting way so that regen activates when you release your throttle. It's kind of like a Tesla or an electric car. You can see the EABS when release throttle. So as soon as you release your throttle, it starts braking. I hate that, but people love it. I'm going to disable my regen for now, but that would be where you activate it in the follow page. Now we keep on scrolling down into the display function. This is all stuff that you really should not change. There are times where the displays have issues with Fardrivers. I will say one way that you can check if it's a possibility is to look at the speed pulses, okay? So if you're having a connection issue with your display, open up the speed pulses and go one by one here. I know there's a lot, but you kind of have to go one by one and see if changing that will help you out. That's helped me out a few times. It's not helped me out a lot of times. Usually it's bad programming in the displays. Another thing actually that can be looked in for the displays is the byte option. So if I open the byte option, you can change that as well. I have seen it have to go on 6. I've seen it have to go on 8. This one is set to 3, but this is getting into the very technical stuff. And then going down here to the protect mode. So these are just standard functions that are set up during the auto learn function. Again, if you really want to be risky, you can adjust some of these other functions, but it's going to show what the low voltage is, and it's going to set your temperature settings and a bunch of other things. So if you are getting like low voltage or over voltage alarms going off and things like that, and you're like, my battery's fine, what's going on? Check out your protect section of this page, because it's a possibility that the voltages and things like that could have gotten set wrong. So like, let's say by chance you just opened it up and mistakenly put over voltage set up to like 70 volts and you plugged in your battery, it would say over voltage protect, and then you need to go back and update that. Scrolling down to the PID parameters. Now this is getting very, very technical. Generally, you're going to see everybody say just stay away from that, and I would also recommend you just stay away from adjusting the PID parameters. If you adjust these settings, things can change dramatically with your bike, and that's not necessarily going to be a good thing. It could make the bike do a bunch of really weird stuff, so I would say stay away from this. However, if you are somebody that's manufacturing bikes and you're wanting to understand more about this, what I would say is go to Google and look up Fardriver PID parameter settings, and you're going to find a PDF, And that PDF is going to have a variety of different parameters for these different numbers. It's going to say, you know, something like jet skis and all these different things. And basically you can set the different values according to those things, but you want to make sure you follow the right ratios. If you don't follow the right ratios in that document, it will mess everything up. But really, guys, I know you're tempted to get in here and change these things, and everybody's going to say, oh, this is how you tune your bike. This is not. Like, just stay away from those functions and really base things off your battery's phase current and your max line current and the percentages and speed. All right, and then if we keep on going down to the product area, you're going to see all these different things, and those don't really need to get changed. So keep them where they're at. And those are pretty much all the different settings. So really, the auto learn function on the Fardriver does a great job. But the main things that you're going to want to watch for are, do you have the correct temperature sensor set up on your bike? Because 9 times out of 10, it's not. So that's going to be creating errors. Make sure your line current is set at least 10% below your BMS. Make sure your phase current is about 2.5 times your line current. All right. Make sure that you set your max RPM to what the motor manufacturer states. It's usually right on their website. It's also sometimes in like the Amazon listing, AliExpress listing, eBay listing, wherever you got your bike. If you're gonna do regen, be really careful with it, and you can activate it in that EABS page. Just make sure, guys, you don't go too crazy to start. I would say set it to no more than 10 to 20% of your line current. Take it out, see how it feels, and then go from there. And you know, if everything still seems kind of weird on it, you've done a bunch of tuning and you're just like trying to figure out what's going on, you can open that thing back up and hit the restore function and restore all the default settings back to normal, run an auto learn, and you'll be back into your safe place where you can start over again and kind of work it up. But start slow. Don't push the max power of your bike right away, you know, and gradually step it up. You know, if you are going out right away and you're getting shutoffs, go to your phase current and lower it down. You want to get as much out of your bike as possible. These things are really expensive, guys, and they're really powerful and they can be really dangerous. So anyway, that's everything that you need to know about programming your Fardriver.